Welcome to Intelligent Automation Radio, the #1 podcast for IT executives seeking insights on the impact and opportunities for innovation that automation is delivering to businesses around the world. Featuring thought leaders in AI, machine learning, orchestration, security automation, and the future of work. And now, on with the show. Welcome, everyone. Our guest today on Intelligent Automation Radio is Matt Smith, Conversational AI Practice Leader and AVP of Cognizant. Matt has had an illustrious career in robotics process automation and IT outsourcing. He served on the leadership board of the International Association of Outsourcing Professionals. And as an industry leader in the field of conversational AI, we wanted to get his perspective on this disruptive technology, which is really taking a number of industries by storm right now. Matt Smith, welcome to Intelligent Automation Radio.
Thank you very much, Guy. It's a pleasure.
Matt, you run Cognizant's conversational AI practice. Can you speak a little bit about what is conversational AI and differentiate it from the other AI we hear about out there?
Yeah, of course. So the way that the term is generally used right now, conversational AI, it actually refers to a number of different ways for brands to build a new way of engaging with their customers. And their customers could be internal workforce, it could be actual customers of theirs that are already buying something from them, it could be prospects. But conversational AI has kind of become an umbrella term for everything that could be, for example, chatbots or intelligent speaker devices or hands-free speaker devices, virtual agents, and even more and more examples of conversational AI we're seeing are applications within a vehicle or in locations within a home where you can speak your instructions to a device versus a traditional way of using a keyboard or some other form of interaction. Conversational AI, it really is a subset, though, of the broader category of artificial intelligence technologies, right? So you can't do true conversational AI without a couple of the key building blocks that are part of AI systems today. So natural language understanding is a critical component of a conversational AI solution. And machine learning is a very important component of conversational AI. Those are really part of the engine, if you will, that makes these technologies able to do what they do and seem very seamless from an end user's perspective.
You mentioned that it's a replacement for keyboards, and you've described conversational AI as hands-free computing or screenless computing. I think most people personally experience conversational AI when interfacing with a chatbot or intelligent speakers like Amazon Alexa. So for organizations that have implemented conversational AI for their customers, how have you seen that it's given them a competitive advantage today?
Well, if you look at kind of some history examples of where a new user interface has emerged, and that's really, if you think about the idea of screenless interface or screenless computing, it's a new user interface, right? So if you look back in some past eras, we had the website era in the 90s, and companies, initially it was seen as a research tool, or it was seen as an extension of branding, and a lot of companies just took their brochures and converted them to websites. But eventually got to a point where they realized there's a lot more here, and customers are interested in doing a lot more than just flipping through something electronically that they could previously have done with a catalog. And much the same happened a decade later with mobile apps. And then it was a little bit of a similar experience where companies then just took their websites and converted that to a mobile app. But in both those cases, a learning curve happened where the idea of these new user interfaces started to catch on with marketing departments, with sales organizations, with customer services teams as a new way to compete for customers, as a new way of differentiating what they can represent to their marketplace. And I think we're seeing that very much play out now with conversational AI, Guy, where people are experimenting with the technologies, and very quickly starting to learn that this is a new way to differentiate in the marketplace. The whole idea of conversational AI is to create a better ease of use, a greater convenience for customers. The idea of personalization and being contextual to a situation is very much a part of it. And again, that's where some of the quote AI technologies come into play. But it's the new competing space for brand differentiation is really what conversational AI is becoming.
So in broad terms, what are some of the lowest hanging fruit best suited for conversational AI applications within an organization?
Well, there's three that we see right now, Guy, with the clients that we work with. And the first is, if you think about very high frequency, highly repetitive informational kinds of requests. So things like frequently asked questions that today might be on a website location or embedded within an app. Finding forms and finding locations or branches or store sites or looking up menu items. So those kinds of again, very high frequency, highly repetitive kinds of interactions. That's one area that we see a lot of organizations starting with first. As far as some of the use cases, lead development and lead conversions is definitely an area of focus for a lot of conversational AI solutions. So as a way of reaching out across a multitude of channels and engaging where your customers are or where they would prefer to engage with you is a great place to look for conversational AI kinds of low-hanging fruit or early opportunities. And the third area is kind of lower complexity but transactional inquiries. So it's a step up in complexity from just information requests, and it will typically require some kind of login or credentialing or authentication of some sort. But for example, being able to look up an account balance or update missing miles on an application, a mileage app for a airline, filling in applications or initiating the ordering of products. Those kinds of today fairly simple transactional activities are also becoming more and more popular for companies that are looking to implement conversational AI.
And so to refine that a little bit further, can you please share with the audience some of the more intriguing use cases where you've seen conversational AI impact in organizations' operations?
Well, the main area of focus right now for most enterprise kinds of clients, Guy, is in the idea of contact center transformation. And so if you think about the way contact centers have evolved over the years and all the elements of technology today that exist, and some of it has been very beneficial for customers, and some of it customers we all have come to despise. You know, the IVR or having to repeat your account number every time you get transferred to someone else. So those are areas where organizations are focusing today on conversational AI and how can it create a better customer experience versus the ways that organizations have used some of these other technologies. So we see a lot of activity in contact center, and it could be, it could be voice interfaces, it could be better versions of web chatbots, it could be an integration of those technologies, it could be intelligent messaging as an option. We were working with one client, and they started to experiment, Guy, with the idea of offering customers that were on hold the option to try and resolve their question themselves using a messaging solution. So they didn't have to download an app, they didn't have to go to a website. It would embed functionality within their existing messaging app on their mobile device, and they had an 80% acceptance rate of customers that chose that option to self-serve rather than waiting on hold for the next available agent, and were able to resolve their own issues. So, you know, those kinds of ideas I think are really going to start to catch on over the next 12 months or so. And then some of the other areas that I think are, you know, more from a user-oriented perspective that we're going to really start to see a lot of examples. So we're doing some work in the fast food industry. And if you think about the way drive-throughs work today, it's a very linear process. You wait in line in your vehicle to pull up to the sign. You tell the operator on the other end what you'd like. They read it back to you. They tell you what you owe. You pull up to a window. And so it's not really ideal either for the customer or for the restaurant, because they can only sell as much traffic as they can run through the drive-through. So the abilities of conversational AI to really extend the footprint of the drive-through concept, but be able to leverage that around vehicles that could be anywhere in the area, to place orders and to do it not necessarily through a person, but to be able to order their items or their meals through conversational AI, and then just pick it up as they get anywhere near the building. Another cool use. And then we're seeing, for example, in retail environments, we've all been in stores, grocery stores or big box stores or big hardware stores, and you simply can't find the item you're looking for. So, we're helping a couple of companies that are operating in the grocery space to put intelligent agents on top of their mobile app. So you can simply ask where an item is located, and not only does it tell you which aisle and which shelf, but it can bring up a visual representation. So as you get closer, it uses echolocation to show you exactly where your item is going to be. So I think those are some of the things that we're seeing right now are really going to be, before much longer, just kind of standard for a lot of the interactions that we have.
I love that last use case, especially at Costco, where they change things every week. I could use that right now.
We all could. Think of the time it would save you and the convenience, too.
Matt, in a recently published article, you state that, quote, conversational AI is a top 2019 priority on the strategic plan for nearly every company we talk with, end quote. Is this an indication conversational AI has crossed the chasm from innovators and early adopters and is now being embraced by the early majority to become a mainstream technology? Or is it still somewhat experimental?
It's straddling those areas. And I think it somewhat depends on the industry, Guy, because there are certain industries where it's somewhat easier to implement. For example, the technology can be used, let's say, equally in a retail environment to do simple transactions like we talked about earlier, or in a healthcare environment. But if you put on top of the healthcare environment the complexities of security and privacy and compliance that exist, it suddenly makes it a little bit, potentially a lot more complicated. So the functionality could be there, but there's other drawbacks that make it more challenging. So what that means is we're seeing certain industries move faster with conversational AI-based solutions than others. But there's definitely this effect of, from a customer point of view, a consumer's perspective, if I can use this technology in a certain way over here, why can't I use it the same way over there? So it's pushing the whole pile forward. And I think it is creating this kind of, we're crossing over into the next era. And we think that we're in this, what I would call the third micro phase, or the third phase of conversational AI. And it really is now about this idea of, starting to put more and more focus on a multitude of ways to engage, connecting these projects, and having a strategy for scale. And so I think we are at that point. And, just if you look around, all the examples you see as a consumer of conversational AI coming into place, I think we can all kind of sense this is happening.
Is there a single biggest factor driving adoption of conversational AI among your clients?
Well, there is. It's really two dimensions. So the drivers are the idea of commerce and customer care, right? So using these technologies can extend or enhance or improve the idea of both commerce with an end customer and customer care, customer support. So that's one dimension as the driver. And then the other is really a need for scale and for strategy. again, I'll draw a parallel to where websites were in the 90s when they first started to gain a degree of popularity. There were a lot of companies at the time that said, what do I need a website for? That's for such and such a kind of brand, or for, that kind of an example or a use. We don't need a website. Our customers wouldn't go there. And then suddenly those same companies found, in many cases, they had hundreds of websites that had popped up as different teams around their organization were experimenting with this technology, and they were building little, today we would call them microsites, but building little websites for their department or their function or their operation. And that's when this idea of scale and strategy suddenly hit IT leaders and brand and marketing leaders back then. We need brand standards, we need architectural standards, we need strategies for security. And so that's what's happening right now with conversational AI. We've had these two earlier phases of a lot of experimentation and a lot of small pilots and small deployments. And now suddenly the IT leadership, marketing leadership, chief digital officers are all stepping in and saying, we have to get our arms around this quickly and have a good, smart strategy for how we're going to go about it.
I read in 2017 that Gartner predicted a couple of developments that I think many people in our audience will find startling. They forecasted that, quote, by 2019, this year, 20% of brands will abandon their mobile apps, end quote. And, quote, by 2020, 40% of all mobile interactions will be via virtual assistants, which I think, of course, means conversational AI, or at least partially conversational AI. Now, my question for you is, have we reached peak app and started transitioning towards conversational AI as the predominant user interface going forward?
So I think, if we look, and 2 years ago, making this kind of prediction, I think it was a realistic way to look at the way things were trending. I would kind of flip it around today, though, in the middle of this first wave that Gartner was predicting. I don't know that it's the brands are necessarily abandoning their apps. It's that the users and customers are looking for alternatives to apps. We've all seen the stats of how many unused apps everybody has on their phones or their tablets, how much functionality within a given app people never even are aware exists, much less, take advantage of. So I think users have just kind of reached app fatigue, right? And they're looking for or hoping for a better way to engage. And, you parallel that with the use of messaging as a preferred way to communicate for a variety of situations, right? Certainly a generational or demographic trend favors messaging for lots of users. But even in the case of like I talked earlier about that contact center scenario where users of any demographic were given the choice on their own to opt into a messaging approach versus waiting online or maybe fumbling through the mobile app, and the uptake was 80% to shift to messaging. So there's plenty of data now showing that messaging is becoming rapidly the predominant way for engaging with customers in this kind of asynchronous method. And so I think we are seeing that really start to play out. As far as calling conversational AI the dominant user interface, I don't know that I would say it's going to become the dominant interface. I think it's going to be one of the primary ways that people will interact with technology going forward. We'll look back on this 25 or maybe 30-year era where the way you would get information into or out of technology was with a keyboard and then a mouse and then a touch screen. We'll look back at that and say, well, boy, that was kind of clumsy. Much like we look back at BlackBerries today and go, that was the way you would send a message, and we kind of chuckle about it, but it's in hindsight. So I think conversational AI will be the same in some situations where it does become predominant for certain uses where it makes the most sense. And in other cases, we'll see other forms of probably AI-driven user interfaces emerge as dominant in those areas.
Do you think conversational AI can eventually extend beyond traditional computing devices? Could we see voice enablement eventually found in everyday things like product packaging?
Well, I mean, look, you don't have to go any farther than the Consumer Electronics Show this year. You know, CES in January 2019 was all about conversational AI. It wasn't always called that, but that's what was kind of the dominant theme across CES. And so it's happening now, and whether it's in home, all the ways that you can drive your home automation or home security or air conditioning and heating systems or lighting is voice controlled in more and more situations. Or you look inside of vehicles and the idea of avoiding distracted driving using voice assistants for everything from navigation to selecting the media that you'll listen to on the dash to conducting basic transactions, perhaps on like we talked about earlier, information requests or placing orders for fast food on your way to work or to run an errand. So we're seeing conversational AI happen there. And then in workplace solutions, there's going to be more and more examples of voice replacing other forms of interaction. So if you think about the way most of us would get into an office building today where we would go to work, you swipe your badge. Well, that could easily be replaced with voice identification instead of having to tote a badge around, or looking up information in the conference room, for example, and connecting to all the systems. We're putting those kinds of solutions in place for clients today. And in healthcare, there's lots of examples of voice automation starting to make its way into patient rooms or even operating rooms or labs or clinical environments where, you want to be able to operate without your hands. You want to engage with the patient, or you want to maintain a sterile environment. So, we'll see lots of those kinds of examples too become more and more prevalent as voice starts to make its way. So, the idea of extending beyond traditional computing is happening really fast.
Matt, you've talked about some amazing advancements today, but AI and automation sometimes frighten people from a job security standpoint. What are some ways you think conversational AI will make employees more valuable to their organization?
Well, it definitely does, but I think it's kind of interesting that, the term AI by itself, for a lot of certainly popular media, it's kind of this dark, robotic future, and it speaks about, the presence of these, robots everywhere and job loss and loss of control and personalization. But when you put the word conversational in front of AI, for just about every situation, it seems like it becomes a much friendlier kind of situation. And so I think we see lots of examples, Guy, where the idea of conversational AI makes a workforce far more productive and able to do things that are much more meaningful and enjoyable. Just like if you look at intelligent automation and what that's been able to do with very menial tasks like data entry or screen scraping or mouse clicking between forms. Conversational AI can automate much of those same kinds of processes. The difference is, in a lot of cases, intelligent automation or earlier forms of RPA required very structured, rules-based processes and structured forms and structured data. Conversational AI can exist in a world where there's not as much structure to the process. So it's natural language versus structured language. And so it gives us more flexibility and creativity. But we're seeing lots of examples, back to the contact center scenario. Conversational AI can be just as beneficial for a contact center agent to deploy in the background of supporting a customer. So they can anticipate better what the right response or the right answer is to a question, or they can have a conversational AI system working in the background, pulling up information for them or pulling up data that'll help them provide a better solution while they're talking to the customer and understanding, exactly what it is that they need or what challenge they're facing. So those are some of the examples, and if you think about the insight and the analysis that conversational AI can start to open up for organizations, because at its heart, it's a significant amount of data. And within that data is oftentimes it's better solutions for customers. It's faster resolution, or it's a quicker identification of the right product or service that somebody needs. So we see that working in tandem now with a lot of workforces. And so as customers, we may not even know that there's a conversational AI system side by side with the agent we're talking to, but increasingly it's there as part of the background supporting them.
Now, you mentioned structured and unstructured processes, and at Cognizant, you've developed some best practices for conversation design. Can you expound a bit on what factors differentiate a successful conversation from one that leaves customers frustrated?
Yeah, there's a few that we think are really important up front. And one of the early lessons that we learned, if you look back a couple of years ago when conversational AI was kind of just getting started as a business idea, it was usually technology first and customer expectation much later in the process. So, one of the things that we stress is you have to start first with what is it that your customer wants to do, or where do they want to engage, and what are their expectations from a conversational AI solution. That's one. The data availability for training the solution is critical. So you could have what might seem like on the surface a really cool use case, but if you don't have the data to train the ML, if you don't have the data to enable the chatbot or the voice assistant to have a deep and broad enough data set to reference against, it won't be a good solution. Another key factor, Guy, is what applications in the back end of our enterprise will we need to have access to, and how easy or how complicated will it be to connect a conversational AI system to these back end applications that run our warehouses, or run our inventory systems, or run our invoicing and billing, or run our customer care. So there's those back-end enterprise apps are still, driving the organization, and so you have to connect to them. And then finally, mentioned earlier, in certain contexts, and particularly in certain industries, you have to have a discussion around security and privacy at the very front of the project, and make sure that that's not something that gets neglected or passed over until you've done too much work, and then you'll find that you'll have to do a lot of backtracking. So those are some of the real key factors that we see.
At this point in the evolution of the conversational AI market, there's multiple consumer platforms like Apple Siri, Google Assistant, Amazon Alexa, etc. Do organizations have to conduct separate development efforts for each platform, or is there a common API they can write to?
The answer is that there's parallel work efforts that will have to happen as organizations look into addressing different devices or different brands. And today, that's simply one of the, call it, limitations or challenges of implementing conversational AI. And it's an important factor because, again, it comes back to, where are your customers? So not everyone uses Siri, not everyone uses Alexa, not everyone uses Google. Some homes have a multitude of those devices. Others are built around just one. And some people don't use them at all. They prefer to use messaging or chat. So the point is, you have to have really a multi-device strategy, a multi-channel strategy, and increasingly with conversational AI, a multimodal strategy. So if you think about some of the newer voice interface devices, where it's not just an intelligent speaker, but there's some images that are included as well. Echo Show or Google Home Hub are great examples on the consumer side, where it's multimodal now. Voice driven, but you have the ability to serve up and show content. So some of the work is reusable. Certainly, the strategies are reusable. Customer expectations, that kind of work is reusable. But when you get down to a code level, oftentimes you're going to be coding for different channels, different devices, and like mentioned, certainly different ways or different modalities of interface. So you have to think through all of that before you undertake a project.
Could be a great market opportunity for someone to come along and universal interface for all that.
Yeah, I mean, I think, well, and that's a good point. I think we're going to start to see, maybe not on the coding side right away, but from a user's perspective, we'll have some of the lessons learned from the way consumers are looking at these technologies too, and eventually they'll say, well, I don't want all these different. I just want my favorite virtual agent. So my agent will drive all these other different technologies or interfaces. So I think we will see some of this start to simplify itself from a consumer perspective for sure.
What are some of your predictions for conversational AI over the next 3 to 5 years?
Well, there's really three big predictions, or three things that I think we're seeing them happen now, guys. So one is virtual agents will become the preferred interface versus apps. So, whether it's Siri, Google Assistant, Cortana, your virtual agent will be increasingly personalized to you and to how you go about your day, whether it's your work day or your personal day. And that virtual agent will engage initially with the apps on your behalf, but at some point, I think we'll see a crossover where virtual agents will engage with other virtual agents or directly with systems. And so the app will fade into more and more into the background and maybe become just a specialized tool. The next is as far as big trends, is the idea of contextualization of the process. And that's where the capabilities of AI and all these supercomputing solutions really come into play. When we see it today, you hear examples of people say, well, I got in my car and Siri popped up and said, it's going to take you 25 minutes to get to the office today. And you go, well, wait a second, how did it know I was going to go to the office? Well, it's contextual. It's running in the background, and it knows that on Monday through Friday, guy gets in his car at 7 a.m. and he goes to work, and it knows where you start and where you stop. And increasingly, it's telling you, well, look, today there's construction. You need to go a different way. So this idea of contextualization is going to become more and more accepted and expected. And then the third is we'll see conversational AI everywhere. And in a sense, we won't see it at all because it will become more and more transparent, right? The idea of voice interfaces will just be the way that we engage, whether it's with our technology or our homes or our vehicles, and even in our workplace. It'll just become part of the backdrop of how we engage. So, contextual everywhere and virtual agents, I think, are three trends to really watch for.
For the enterprise IT managers who have never dealt with conversational AI, what should they know before deploying it?
Well, so Steve Jobs probably has the most appropriate quote, and he was talking for a different era, but I think it applies really well here, which is you've got to start with the customer experience and work backwards towards the technology, not the other way around. And I think a lesson that we would impart to whether it's IT leadership or marketing leadership or brand digital officers is just that. So focus on the customer first. That's one. Link your projects as much as possible, which means for leadership, bringing together different teams, business teams, IT teams, cross-functional groups that all will have their perspective on where conversational AI can come into play. Again, think beyond the idea of chatbots. And most companies, I think, are today thinking past the point of, a website text-based chatbot, and think about other ways that you're going to be using conversational AI. So it's that omni-channel, multi-device, multimodal future that is becoming the new user interface. And then another important point, I think, is look for innovation partners that can help not just from a project delivery perspective, but also in terms of supporting the strategy of how these technologies are being deployed and where they're going, and can help think about the roadmaps that should be built along the way. You'll save a tremendous amount of time if you've got those right partners on the front end, and I think you de-risk your projects in many ways by doing that with partners that can help from an innovation perspective, as well as do kind of call it basic deployment kinds of capabilities.
Matt, you speak with customers all day long about conversational AI. What is the one takeaway piece of advice you have for CIOs, CTOs, other IT executives considering or already deploying conversational AI in their environments?
I've said it several times, I think, but it's really the voice of the customer. The projects we've seen, Guy, that have the best success started with the customer, not just thinking about, but talking to customers and looking at data of past customer interactions and testing out in really small MVP, so minimal viable project or product approaches before trying to scale and get too complex. So customer first and go bite-sized pieces, very short sprints, and iterate as you go. And those are where the companies that we work with have followed that kind of a plan. They have very good success, and when they don't, they'll see the adoption just isn't what they expected, or even worse, the reaction from customers is to let them know on social media or other places that they hate their new chatbot. So that's if you start again, voice of the customer, I think you're going to be very well served in this new user interface era.
I think that's excellent advice, even outside the realm of conversational AI. All right, looks like that's all the time we have on this episode of Intelligent Automation Radio. Matt Smith, thank you very much for joining us today and sharing your thoughts about the current state of conversational AI. We've really enjoyed having you as our guest.
Guy, I thoroughly enjoyed it. Look forward to talking again.
Matt Smith, Conversational AI Practice Leader and AVP of Cognizant. Be sure to get in touch with Cognizant to learn more about their services. Thank you for listening, everyone. And remember, don't hesitate. Automate.
Thank you so much for listening today. Please subscribe to our podcast on iTunes, SoundCloud, Spotify, or anywhere else you listen to podcasts. We publish new shows regularly, and you won't want to miss one. And please remember to give us a rating. It helps others find the show. Intelligent Automation Radio is sponsored by Ayehu, the leader in intelligent automation solutions for IT and cybersecurity. You can get more information about Ayehu by visiting our website at ayehu.com. That's AYEHU.com. Ayehu, creating the successful path to the self-driving enterprise.